All right, we'll go ahead and get started this evening. Sorry for a few minutes late here. Is there a motion to accept or modify the agenda?
Madam Chair, I move to remove item 2D from the consent agenda and add the action items to modify and update the supplemental salary scale and add to the action agenda the substitute pay rate.
So that will be adding an action item D and E, and then removing from the consent agenda 2D. Is there a second on that? Second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Moving on to the consent agenda, is there a motion?
I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
As modified.
Oh, I'm sorry, as modified.
Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. All right, first action item this evening is going to be the approval of adult meal prices. First, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this action item? Okay, Mr. Smith.
Good evening. In order to meet the 2023-24 VDOE minimum adult price requirement, Warren County Public Schools Nutrition Department is required to increase the adult breakfast and the adult lunch meals price. Currently, adult meal prices are $2.40 for breakfast and $4 for lunch. VDOE states that the school fund authority, which would be Warren County Public Schools, must ensure that federal reimbursement, the children's payments, and other nonprofit food service revenues do not subsidize program meals served for adults. Adult meals must be high enough, or must at least equal the amount to compensate for the total paid reimbursement and the commodity value that USDA does not provide for these adult meals. The paid reimbursement and commodity rates change each year, meaning adult meal prices may change each year. For lunch, prices for adults must be the free reimbursed rate plus the performance based reimbursement, and what that is we certify our menus with VDOE. So we receive funding reimbursement for that, plus the year value of USDA foods. USDA provides a contribution toward our reimbursement per meal as well of 24.5 cents. And the needs lunch rate, severe need lunch rate, that's based upon the percentage of students that would qualify for free and reduced lunch, although we do free lunch for all of our students. So this in itself is, it's required that for an adult meal, it cannot be less than what the state or what VDOE or USDA reimburses us. Because if that is the case, then the money that we get back for the students is compensating for what is the difference between what the adult pays and what we're reimbursed, and we're not allowed to do that. So it is not something that we ever want to raise prices, but it is a requirement based upon our reimbursement rate.
Thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions for Mr. Smith? Is there a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll make that. I move that the Warren County School Board approves the adult breakfast rate to $2.55 and the adult lunch to $4.60, effective August 17th, 2023.
Is there a second? A second. Any discussion on that? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Next up, we have the Memorandum of Understanding with Warren County Department of Social Services. Dr. Ballenger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to welcome everybody tonight, all those in attendance and all those that will be joining us online later on. So our memorandum of understanding with Warren County Department of Social Services, the Code of Virginia requires that each local department of social services and school division to adopt a written interagency agreement as protocol for investigation of child abuse and neglect reports. So this is something that we started the conversations back in the summer with the Department of Social Services. They had the town's attorney draw it up, sent it to us. We then reviewed it, sent it to our attorney. They recommended some changes and some edits, sent it back to the Department of Social Services. They sent it to their attorney. Everything is signed off on. Everything looks good. Mr. Marks and I both agree that we are good to go with this MOU, and so it is presented tonight for you to approve.
Any questions for Dr. Ballenger on that? Is there a motion?
I move that the memorandum of understanding between the Warren County Public Schools and the Warren County Department of Social Services be approved as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion on this?
I just wanted to thank social services and everyone for getting this in place as quickly as they did. It's very thorough, and I don't think this can be misunderstood, so.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Great, thank you. Next up, we have acceptance of donation, and it's Mr. Smith. Oh, so it's an action item if anybody wanted to speak on it.
Thank you. Before I start this, I'd like to bring up Ms. Burley, the principal of Skyline High School. It's really her efforts and so forth. I'm merely the messenger here. Skyline High School respectfully requests approval of a generous donation of a bench from the Lions Club. The bench will have a plaque recognizing that the bench has been placed in memory of Mr. Jim Kenny Sr., father of Skyline High School science teacher Jim Kenny. The bench is 8 feet long, weighs 400 pounds, and is constructed of reinforced concrete, treated lumber, and galvanized bolts. The bench is proposed to be situated in a beautiful shady spot under a tree outside the Skyline High School cafeteria, adjacent to the car drop-off pickup lane. In your folder, you should have a picture of the bench as well as, or actually in your, on your board docs. Yep, I'm sorry, on your board docs. There should be pictures of the bench as well as its location. The bench could be used by students while they wait for their pickup and or offer a place of quiet reflection. And Mr. Helmick here has also met with Ms. Berlin and so forth to say that that's an appropriate spot.
Any questions for Mr. Smith? Is there a motion?
I move that the donation of a wooden bench, is it a wooden bench or a concrete bench?
It's a concrete wood.
I move that the donation of a wooden and concrete bench for Skyline High School by the Front Royal Lions Club be accepted with gratitude.
I'll
Is there?
second that.
Great, thank you. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Thank you. And then we have our last minute additions to the action agenda, and that's gonna be on the, but the modified pay scale and supplemental pay scale, and then also the addition to the substitute pay rate.
Up in the, right, if you reset your browser,
Did it
hit the little
go
arrow,
up?
Mr. Grant has already pushed those over,
Thank
so
you,
they
Mr.
should be
Grant.
listed.
And Mr. Lee is here to speak about those this evening, correct?
So just refreshing, yes,
Working on
Mr. Lee is.
Push the little circle arrow at the top.
Oh, yeah.
So I have timesheet additions first. Is there, I know this was a super last minute, but if anybody wanted to speak about this action item,
So
Just go back and.
give the opportunity now. And I'll ask again after Mr. Lee's had a chance to explain to us what the additions are.
You ready? I'm
I
sorry.
am, yeah,
Sorry.
apologize for that.
No problem. So there are two the attachments there's a couple of highlighted items there. Our secondary schools have found in the past that we have school employees that are involved in our musicals, whether they're plays or something with our chorus presentations, things of that nature. And a lot of times it's them playing music on the piano or something along those lines. And we don't have a current pay rate or item on the pay scale salary to compensate those folks for that. So the accompanist would be a $40 an hour rate, so that those folks that help out with those musicals can be compensated for their extra time outside of school hours. The other $40 per hour rate there on the miscellaneous scale is the after school programs that are housed at the non-traditional school for the 3 to 5 program, and then at the secondary schools the 4 to 6 program. So those are teacher instructed sessions after school where teachers are working with a small group of kids instructionally that have been referred to that program for various reasons. So that would be a $40 an hour rate for those. The teacher mentor program that works with our instructional team at central office. Those folks that are taking on mentorships for our new teachers would receive a $500 supplement for working with one individual new teacher, and then any additional new teachers that they would be willing to take on would be at an additional $50 rate. So that's kind of the breakdown of those two items that we would like to.
I know the 3 to 5 and the 4 to 6 programs aren't new. Is that what we were previously paying? We just didn't have it.
Yes, ma'am. So we were using the homebound because we were having issues with finding staff for homebound. So we created the 4 to 6 kind of as a solution to homebound, administrative homebound, but then also it developed into more of an alternative ed setting. So since we started with those rates at the $40 for those 4 to 6, we were going to keep those. And since we didn't add a 4 to 6, we still had the homebound on there, but there's more of a delineation between those. But really, that program will be utilized for homebound services it's an alternative ed setting. And so that's why we wanted to make sure it was listed for the 3 to 5, 4 to 6, because last year when we talked to the board about the rates, and the only rate we had at that time was that homebound, and that's what we were paying as a solution. Also, on the $500 mentor stipend, remember that was something the board wanted $500. We brought $250, we bumped it to $500, but it just never made it on the list. So in order for us to pay the people, we need to put it on the list. So that's why it's there. The only thing we're adding is the $50 that we would like to add. That way, if they take on an additional person, it's an extra $50. And that coincides with some other things that we've done. I think if you look up just above that for instructional coaches, they do a little bit more, and their base is $550, and then they get $100 for each additional, because they are doing more work. But this mentor is a little bit different, but we want to make sure we had that 50 in there too for each additional. So it's really, these things had to be added to the supplemental pay scale so that we could legally pay.
And those are for the year, right, the mentor?
Yes.
That's what I was gonna ask, they're
Yes.
once a year payment.
Yes.
Are they paid at
No.
the beginning of the year,
No.
end of the year?
So
or-
what we talked about was $250 at Christmas, and then
Split it up,
$250
right?
$250
We
at
did
the
talk
end
about
of the year.
that. Okay.
Yeah, that's what we talked.
We
Now,
did.
we can also always give the employee the opportunity to take that over a monthly, spread that out over the month, but I think most of them would rather have that at 250, halfway through at 250.
Gotcha.
At an additional time.
So with this homebound rate that's on here, it says individual $40 for $25. Is the homebound teacher driving their own car, and are they getting paid for the drive there, the drive back? Are they not getting paid if the student doesn't show up? Like,
So, I mean, the homebound teacher would just submit their timesheets as far as whether that includes mileage or not. That's if that employee submits that. I mean, I've always been willing to pay anybody their mileage if they submit their mileage. That's something that we should be doing. So if somebody is driving and it's falls into that area, then they should be able to submit that.
and they get paid for their time to drive there and drive back?
No, you would only, so
They
if they're
only get-
doing mileage, they would get their mileage, the mileage rate, but then the time would start when they're there. So you can't double dip, you can't pay on the hourly and
Okay.
the mileage at the same time. So they would get the mileage or be paid. And I know, I don't wanna put Miss McDonald on the spot, but I know she's only had about 6 months working with the homebound, and, she could probably speak on, because all of the homebound services were handled out of special services before. And then we kinda have now split that up, so now part of it's gonna be handled out of special education or special services, and some of it's gonna be handled out of pupil services. So, the part that goes with medical homebound and special education, Ms. McDonald will be dealing with and working with staff members on. This 4 to 6, 3 to 5 is pupil services, which is a regular ed, alternative ed. Ms. Vernazza will be working with that. So, we want to make sure we have some consistency there, but anybody that turns in, it is reviewed and then submitted for payment, so.
I just want to clarify, medical will be regular attendance.
Okay.
So you can services.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think, because obviously we didn't get to see this until now, and so I'm having to thought process this through as we go, but I'm just trying to think of like the fairness aspect of this, because I know I've had homebound teachers in the past that have complained that, they drive all the way out there to get there, and for whatever reason, the child doesn't show up, and then they have to drive all the way back, and then they don't get paid for it. So is it fair to pay the people who are here, well, metaphorically here, from the set 3 to 5 or 4 to 6, they definitively get their $40 an hour, and they aren't having to wear and tear their car, they're not having to risk children not showing up, like they are guaranteed that time. So does it make it unfair to our homebound teachers to make the exact same amount of money to do what seems to me like a harder job? But is that,
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean,
Okay.
And I'm not, I just know, so that was the rate we paid last year. If we go back on that rate, then.
I'm not suggesting to go back on that rate, I'm
So
suggesting
the other
to pay the
thing would
homebound
be,
teacher more.
the board, if you want to increase that homebound rate to a 45 or a 50, then that is up to the board. And I'm fine with, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay,
Because you're right, that when it comes to being in a home, that is a little bit different setting. But that is a decision for the board if you want to.
What about the number of students in the 3 to 5 and 4 to 6?
So those will vary. So as students, get placed in there or it's recommended and they go through that process, students can't, the goal is to get them back into regular ed, not to leave them in there for the full year. So we set up goals for them to reach, and then they're moved back into the regular school. And so we've had some to where, say you had 5 students that were in the 4 to 6 program at, say, Skyline High School. But then they work their way back and you don't need those teachers, so you're not paying those teachers anymore because they're not working with students. So it depends upon the number of staff we need. Now, if you get to where we have 16 to 18 students in there and you have 2 staff members and an instructional assistant in there, then you're working with almost 20 students.
But the goal is 5 to 6 students per teacher during those sessions? Is
I
that
think
you're
that's
saying?
what we were trying to do. I know Ms. Sperling worked, she ran a program, but I think we try to stick with about 6 students or so per, to try to make it manageable, but, if, also you could work your way up to about 10. And still be comfortable with one teacher or one teacher and an instructional assistant or something of that nature. So, yes, it's based on the level of.
I mean, I agree with you. I just don't think that these two things are comparable at all, because if you're homebound with one child at home, but then you're in a classroom for 2 hours with up to 10, I
Well,
mean, it's completely,
I,
the scales,
no,
I agree, they don't have to be the same probably.
no, so what is this homebound group rate of 25? Is that 25 per child per hour?
What is homebound group anyway?
What?
It's a homebound group.
That one I cannot answer, so.
Yeah, I mean,
And I think those should be 40. I think it's just a case where when the one was updated last year, the other didn't.
The other didn't get updated?
It doesn't make sense that an individual homebound would get 40.
Right.
And doing a whole group would get 25.
As
Right.
long as it's per
Or-
child.
that's what I was wondering.
Because I know, like, when I teach, if I'm teaching a class, that's my lowest pay. If I teach a private lesson, it's more, and then if it's a private lesson for 2 or 3, it goes up, up, up. So,
maybe we could make a motion on this, the highlighted rates, and then also request that we take another look at homebound and see if there's a better way we could be compensating them, and talk about that at a future meeting.
I think there's a couple of areas that personally I would like to look at, so maybe just a pay scale in general, just kind of, because I think there's some things that just haven't been updated for a while that I think in all, we probably just need to look at everything. Because like, this wasn't even an agenda item, and these things pop out that you just don't.
As we start and we were like, hey, we've got these people, how are we gonna do time sheets? And we've had transitions, so we transitioned from one HR director last year into Mr. Lee, and so, what we were talking with that person, and now Mr. Lee, he wasn't a part of those conversations. And so, there's always gonna be some of those gaps that we're gonna have to go back and fill as they come up. And then we're like, oh, yes, this was discussed then, we need to go ahead and make that adjustment, because we were going to make that adjustment moving forward, but because of the changeover, it got missed. Nobody's fault, it's just, that's what happens. But I agree that with Rob, that should have been, that 25, you should not be doing a group, but, and how do they define group? If you have 2 siblings in the house, is that considered a group? I mean, you're still at the same house with a family,
but
doing
teaching two
a
different
service.
No.
Two
Uh,
individual
That's doing 2
students.
jobs at,
Well,
yeah.
you're doing two individual students, but also, also at that same point in time, you have those people in that 4 to 6 program that are doing with 6 to 10 different students. So, I'm willing, I agree that, maybe we should look at that homebound rate a little more. But if you remember, we were not able to find homebound teachers last year. That is why we moved to this 4 to 6 programs at our schools and developed those programs. And we were not getting any teachers to want to do that 4 to 6 program at the rate of $25 an hour. So that's when we upped it and said we will do the homebound rate of 40. And then I don't think we had trouble staffing at that point in time. But before, we were having trouble staffing even the 4 to 6 programs at a 25. People just were not willing to do that.
Yeah, I completely understand the increase for that. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that now we don't create a problem with getting homebound teachers as well. Do you know offhand, not to put you on the spot, which other positions you'd like to consider?
I would like to look at the dual enrollment
Okay.
areas.
Dual enrollment and homebound.
And then on the teacher mentors, are there several signed up, paired up for this school year?
Yeah, so we're a little over what we budgeted for, with the teacher mentors.
But that's
So,
good.
that
People
is good.
are wanting to
That
do
is
it.
good, but we are a little over, so we're gonna have to make sure we cut in some other areas to make sure that we be able to meet those needs.
I think that's an investment that will pay off though, absolutely. And I would like to see that number continue to go up as well.
I have a question on the teacher mentor program. Who monitors the mentors? Is it the building principal, or how
So,
does that work? Because there has to be, we have to be assured that there's some accountability there. I tell you, I faced this myself. When I was a returning teacher, there was a mentor assigned to me, and I never saw the mentor. I didn't even know I had a mentor. And that person got supplemented that whole year. So I want to make sure that there's some oversight with the mentors.
there is some oversight with that, and I would call upon Ms. Bragg. She can talk a little bit more about that, because Hope runs that, all of our mentoring program. So, Ms. Bragg, if you want to kind of answer the question for Mr. Rinaldi as far as, because I also know we have a partnership with JMU that we have to go through. I think it's some mentoring, but I don't want to speak out of turn, so Ms. Bragg.
So Hope Petty, our teacher support coordinator on the instructional resource team, she pairs up the mentors within the district, well, either by, common grade level, common building. They had to complete a training in order to be a mentor and be eligible for the $500, in addition to, meeting with Hope and just learning about kind of what the program was going to be. And then they do have regular check-ins. They keep mentor-mentee logs that Hope sort of evaluates through our frontline professional development system. And then we also have the induction coaches. Those are building-based, and they also have check-ins, and she's monitoring that as well. So our new teachers and returning teachers that are still part of that TREC program, they're getting some good support from both a personal assigned mentor and then also an induction coach within the building. So it's kind of a multi-leveled opportunity to seek out different people for different situations and things like that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this item? Does anyone that's here visiting want to talk about this item now that we've talked about it as an action item? Now we're doing things backwards a little bit, but that's.
I just want to confirm, are you saying that the homebound is indeed harder and deserves a higher rate?
I think what we're saying is we're coming back to that.
Yeah, I
right?
think we're saying we're gonna discuss that
Okay.
later, but yes, I wanna make sure that everyone's fairly compensated.
So, Madam Chair, one suggestion I would make is to go ahead and correct that 25 to 40 as well. That way there's, just right now, because that,
The group.
yes, I would go ahead and just make a motion that be added to the changes. And then as we go back, so that way we don't have that, because if somebody does go out and do a group, it says 25.
Right.
We don't want that. So, I would recommend that you go ahead and correct that now that was brought up as far as missing that, so.
And then with the mileage, is that something that is in policy somewhere, or does that need to be added as like a little addition next to the pay on this chart that we have here?
So typically with mileage, I believe it, and Mr. Valentine, it should be in policy, and there should be a sheet that they have. So
Okay.
like most divisions and with our policy, and correct me if I'm wrong on the reimbursement rate, but since we offer vehicles, so an employee could take a vehicle out to the child's home and drive it back. But if they choose to take their own vehicle, it's at a reduced rate because we have a vehicle sitting there that they could drive. So the reimbursement rate may be 31 and a half or 36 and a half.
31 and a half.
31.5 is the reimbursement rate that's been in policy. But there are vehicles that people could drive out to those sites. So they are available at the schools. We have one at central office that just sits there. So if somebody wants to come grab that one, drive out wherever they want to, and drive back, and not use their own vehicle, that they can do that.
Well, and I don't know that we have any current homebound teachers that actually go to the house. They usually find a common meeting area, whether it's the community center, whether it's here, whether it's the library. I think just this day and age, it's not a common practice that they go to the individual's house.
But is it correct information that they are not getting paid if the teacher shows up and the child doesn't?
I don't know, I would have to research that. I mean, it would be based on an hour. I mean, I would say that if they show up there and they're there for 15 minutes, that the child doesn't show up, what we typically do is give them an hour for their time that they were there. So we're not gonna not give them anything. If they show up and they're there to provide the services, I've always been on the side of the employee to give them the benefit of the doubt that if the child doesn't show up, they were there ready to do the job. Although you were, scheduled to be there for 3 hours, you're only getting 1 hour, even though you were only there 30 minutes, and the child didn't show up. So, they can always put in their 1 hour, and I think that's been consistent with what we've done, Rob, as far as when it comes to timesheets and looking at splitting between if it's an hour or a half hour or something, we always rotate up, right?
I believe so, yes.
So, I mean, if that has happened to somebody, then, they can let me know or Rob know, and, but they should, and that's one thing, I'll visit with both directors that'll be dealing with our homebound services, that if they go to the place and they don't show up, then tell that employee to bill us an hour. Because that was their time that they were there for that day. So we can definitely make that clear to anybody that's doing the services.
Is an hour enough to compensate somebody? Because, it's if they take that position and they do their budgets like everybody should, and they say, okay, I've got so many appointments that I can do, and they show up, and a couple of the appointments don't show up, is an hour enough? Because they had to prepare for that appointment.
That's something we could look into. I mean, I don't know what the homebound teachers are doing as far as supporting. That'd be more of a conversation to have with later on with staff, with Ms. McDonald and Ms. Bernazza, who works
Okay.
with those individuals, and maybe bring those staff members in to talk about prep time, things of that nature, and what's going on.
What's the frequency of no-shows? If I don't show up for a doctor appointment, I'm going to get a bill for that.
Well, we can't bill anybody.
I understand that.
So,
But you could tell them, like, if you are consistent, like, parents are not showing up, like, parents have a duty to keep their appointments. So if they are routinely wasting our staff's time and it's costing the taxpayers money, then what do you do from there? Tell them
So-
they're not eligible anymore? Like, there's
No,
gotta be
no,
some
so
sort
we-
of recourse.
we
Hold them
so
accountable.
the recourse would then be, that would probably, we would start looking at truancy, saying that is an attendance
Okay.
issue, and then truancy, getting our truant officers involved, and then going that route through the legal, because we cannot just say, well, we're not gonna give you an education. We have to provide, and we have to at least show up and be there. If the parent's not bringing them, then that to me is an absence. That to me is an unexcused absence. And so then that's when Mr. Smith and and our two attendance officers would then start having conversations with the families and see what are some other courses that, or recourse that we have moving forward.
But I'd like to know the frequency of no-shows, and maybe we're beating a dead dog here because it's not that much, but if it is a chronic issue, then something needs to be done about that.
Well, and I think last year, most of, the issue that we were having was the staffing and getting enough people out there, being able to support that. That's why we started those 4 to 6 programs at the school, because now those are a little more centrally located.
Sure.
And we can get those students, and I know we, sometimes we even can provide a transportation from there. Most of our schools have a van, and I know even at Skyline High School, they talked about using their Suburban to drive some students home from the 4 to 6 program. So we're able to do a little more when it's there on our site, with us being able to do our own programs. And those programs have been successful since we implemented them back in January, February of last year. We have seen a lot of positives and some movement in the right direction from them being in those programs, because even when it's at our school, some of the people that were coming in were counselors and things of that nature. And so we were able to offer a lot more services being at our site than we were at a homebound. That's an off-site somewhere else.
So we'll hear about this probably at our September work session, maybe a little more update on some of these questions and some answers, and look at that scale a little better.
And I think our September meeting is a retreat. But we can still discuss this.
Sure. I'd like to ask for a motion on this item.
I move that the Warren County School Board approve the accompanist rate for $40 an hour, the after-school programs 3 to 5 to 4 to 6 rate of $40 an hour, the mentor rate at $500 supplement plus $50 per extra teacher, as well as the homebound group rate to $40 an hour.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? Thank you. And then, Mr. Lee, we also have the addition to the substitute pay rate.
So that's the ESS, Mr. Lee. So I can start with that one.
Okay.
So when we went through, and you can step in if you're ready. Oh,
You can start and I'll be ready.
okay. So if you remember when we first started having the conversation about the rates, and they wanted to add some rates for certified staff. And so it was on one sheet when we had the conversation, but then when we moved to approve, after there were some conversations had, it was accidentally not put on the next sheet. So it was on one sheet when we had the conversation, but when you approved it, it wasn't. And I think that kind of, I guess, would sum it up.
Yeah, I'm in contact with ESS probably 5 times a day at least. And we're just continuing to talk about this, that, and the other. And so they pay on a weekly basis as opposed to a monthly basis like we do. So they're getting ready to issue their first round of payments to our staff. So with that in hand, we realized that we failed to include the full day substitute degree placement item on the proposed addendum that was approved at our last board meeting. So what we're asking is that if we could add that full day substitute degree placement, which is $115, and then also a half day substitute for a degree teacher position, for the half day pay rate of $57.50. And I apologize, I went through that list and I thought we had every area covered, but unfortunately we did not. So we just want to be able to compensate those teachers that deserve that compensation.
Any questions from Mr. Lee?
This will be at the negotiated lower percentage rate.
Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
that's, the bill rate is at that lower negotiated rate.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make that.
I move that the Warren County School Board approve the addition of the full day / half day to Greek teacher rate update to our current approved addendum.
Is there a second?
I'll second that one.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you, Mr. Lee. All right. Work session items. The first one is gonna be facilities, food service, and transportation update. Mr. Smith.
The food service department offered the summer food service program for the months of June and July. The program went smoothly, and those that could participate enjoyed daily hot meals at some of our schools and at our parks around the community. Skyline Middle School, Warren County High School, and Skyline High School got their upgrades and a more streamlined serving line improvements. At one of our meetings earlier, you, as the board, you approved our ability to take our serving lines and put in some cold trays and hot tray areas to make the assembly line much smoother. It's worked great. You should go out, visit, see it. It's really nice. At E. Wilson Morrison, we received a new reach-in freezer for food storage. With the LFK renovations, we upgraded the dish machine and the new walk-in refrigerator and a freezer, which is a huge improvement, and the team there is extremely grateful for what has been done. I would like to note as part of that project, the food service folks, I believe it was around $245,000 toward that project that they contributed, so we're very thankful. So now, because of that very large walk-in freezer refrigerator, there's plenty of space for foods, and the overall safety of the kitchen is greatly improved with our renovations. Our opening food service staff meeting was excellent this year, and with over 60 food service team members in attendance. Food and physical safety training was covered, as well as the USDA regulation updates, and our DSS, our child abuse and neglect recognition training was done. And I'd just like to personally say I present this information, but the work is really done here by Nicole Kinsey and her staff and all they do. Moving into transportation, we were able to do the installation and the setup of all the radios on the bus as well as at the schools. We have them in the buses and in the cars. There are 2 schools that we're currently working on where the frequency is giving us somewhat of a problem, but we anticipate resolving this with a different type of radio and antenna. And Mr. Mitchell actually stopped in today and we went over that, so he's working on that currently. Our car routes, most of our car driving routes are for our students who receive special services. And our focus there is to be able to provide the students the most least restrictive environment. For our car drivers, it fluctuates the number of drivers that we would need because a lot of times it depends upon the needs that we get of our students. One semester or 1 year, you may need 6 or 8, and then the next semester you may need 10 or 12. During the summertime, in the garage, and that garage is managed by Jerry Smith, who does an excellent job, has been with us for many years. So the fleet was serviced and repaired this past summer. And that if you have an opportunity to, would like to go out to the garage and see that, it's behind the transportation building, and sometimes those guys get forgotten by just people in general, and they do an excellent job. And there's so many different special requirements for a bus. Certain things just has a shelf life. And you've got to, and after so many miles, certain things have to happen to the bus, whether it needs to or not. It has to have its physical, I guess you would say. And that we constantly work on adjusting our routes So this year, we were able to trim an entire, or remove an entire route off of an elementary school just by rerouting, and still working with the time frame of which we would like students on the bus, have the shortest ride possible. So with our tiered starting times, we're down to about 29 or 30 regular routes. So that's really good. And then we also have 5 special needs routes. So we feel good about where we are constantly working with our routes as children move in and out, those type of things. It helps us to adjust our routes to get the students home or to school as quickly as possible and safe. The 8 new buses that we ordered, it seemed like years ago. They actually were being told that in mid-September, we will receive the 8 buses that we ordered. Those 8 buses are 77 passenger buses. And one of those buses include wheelchair access, so a ramp and those type of things. So we're very excited about that coming in. And for that, I'd like to give thanks to Mr. Mitchell, Aaron Mitchell. Transportation is very fluid. I mean, things constantly change. And he is constantly out there, and once again, he does the work, and I'd like to give him the credit and his staff. Now, on facilities, Mr. Helmick is here as well, and I'd like to read through some of the things with the LFK project and some of the things that we all work on together throughout the summer, because as a first 2 groups, I mean, a tremendous amount of work is being done. I'll start with the LFK project. The LFK project is going well. And what does that mean? 61% of the project is complete. And that's really good. We haven't lost a day for weather or interruptions or those type of things. Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the project, they're completed. All the demolition, this is a 5-phase project. All demolition work for Phase 3 is completed, and renovation for Phase 3 actually began on July 31st. As I mentioned, it's a 5-phase project, and Phase 3 is scheduled to be completed by December 31st. However, we're actually slightly ahead of that date at this time. So we have an opportunity here to finish this phase up a little bit sooner than we had anticipated by December 31st, but we have to see how it all goes. But at least we put ourselves in position to be successful. Phase 4 is scheduled to start January 1st and end May 24th of 2024. Phase 5 is scheduled to start May 25th, and with most of the completion or substantial completion done by August the 2nd and final completion by September the 1st. The project remains on schedule and on budget. Our next building committee meeting is August 23rd. The A&E, let's talk now next about E. Wilson Morrison Elementary School. At one of our meetings, we approved a resolution or to ask the Board of Supervisors for the funding from our capital improvements to start the A&E for the conversion of the auditorium into a multi-purpose gymnasium room. ZMM was the firm that was awarded the A&E services, and ZMM, once again, folks were here today speaking with the principal, and also we're working with the physical education teacher on things that they would like to see in the multi-purpose room. Funding for the A&E has been approved, as I mentioned, by the county, and funding for the construction would need to be approved by the county at a later date once we get to that point. A tentative schedule for a project such as this is about 60 days of A&E, so roughly 2 months, 30 days of the bidding process, and roughly 4 to 5 months of construction. Moving from the E. Wilson Morrison, the maintenance building. If you drive by there on the bypass, you'll notice that the maintenance building, Mr. Helmick and his staff, they are painting that building in-house. And before July 1st of last year, we were able to have the funds to put a new roof on that particular building, which was desperately needed. Over at LFK, his crew has been working on some of the groundwork or the landscaping there in front of LFK. You'll notice that they've removed multiple large shrubs and some trees, and we found lots of things. One thing we found is a lot of yellow jackets. We found a lot of nests, and it's good that we were able to remove those in time before the students return, because for some students, or could be some people in general, a bee sting can be extremely dangerous. But please go by that facility and just see the difference that has removing of some of those old shrubs, and how that has really brought out the windows and those type of things, the new windows in that building. Summer painting, drywall repairs, plumbing, electrical work, and HVAC has been going on this summer. I know his guys, Mr. Helmut's staff, were out at Skyline High School upgrading some of the, adding some additional handicap parking spots closer to the building. And within the first week, his staff received over 200 work orders for the start of school. Once teachers get back and those type of things, they think, I need things moved from this wall to the next. So, but now at this time, he had mentioned that he's below 100 at this time. So that's a tremendous job. That's a staff of about 65.
We're at 65 work orders.
Okay. So, and your staff is that of about 13, correct?
13,
13. So that's moving. Going from facilities, I'd like to bring your attention to a folder that you have there on your desk area.
So
Yes.
Can we pull this table up, because they're not gonna have room to open up all those maps?
Well, I'm not sure they really want to, I mean, it's up to them. We can do whatever, but I'm not sure they want to open up. Yeah, I'm going to tell them what they had.
Space limited, and I know Brian has the laminated ones back there, right?
Yes.
So what I could do, if the board would like, I could pull the table up here, put the laminated ones up here, so you can see kind of what Buck is talking about. That would be fine.
Coming out with that, provided for you are folders that include hard copies of land, space, and buildings, etc., owned by Warren County Public Schools. So the large, you have an aerial. So there's a large 11 by 17 aerial view of the property that we own.
This may be easier for you guys. Here, I'll get half here, and I'll get half here, and you pass it down.
The blue lines outline on your aerial, your 11 by 17, your blue lines outline our property. Okay? Now behind each of your 11 by 17s are 8.5 by 5 pages that break down each of those segments. When you look on your very large sheet, you'll see we're broken down by the blue, but in some places there's like segments. You see those type of things. So I give credit here to Mr. Helmut for our large views that we have here. He worked with the county zoning to be able to get that. The sheets that are attached to that are a breakdown of each of those segments. And there, I'd like to give credit to Mr. Mitchell for assisting with the GIS.
Sorry.
Yeah, they include, those 8.5 by 11, they include the details of the property. And with the information that you would have here, I'd ask over the next, maybe prior to our next meeting or those type of things, if we take some time to look over some of the documents, look at some of where our land is, and that I would encourage an invitation possibly, and I can help organize this, or organize it if you'd like, for our town and county planning departments to update us while we're looking at our properties on future projects that the town may have, future projects that the county may have, because this would affect our future planning as far as we move forward with facilities. And just to note, I'm going to start attending the monthly joint planning meetings between the town and the county in regards to a project, so I'll be able to bring information to the board on that, because some of that could affect our student enrollment and our facilities plan down the road. So,
Yeah. So we did find some mistakes on there, and I don't think we've gotten them corrected, but like if you look at Missy Jeffries, where the library is on our property, but on this map it doesn't show it, but it is probably tied to your maps that are behind, so the other little pieces of paper, it will show that that property is Warren County School Board, but on the large map, it does not.
there's also a section of E. Wilson Morrison Elementary School. If you don't have to look at it now, but if you do, on there it shows like a section of the parking lot
Yeah.
that is like not there. It's like it belongs to someone else. It does belong to us, because if you look on those 8.5 by 11, it will break down that it is ours. So there is some work that we need to work with the county on just making sure they're updated. Those type of counties been great to us on working with us this week on getting us this information. But at least gives us an opportunity to actually visually see what we have.
So I see all the skips here, but there was talk of possible land that we own off of 55, remember?
So on the hill, that's,
So that's not, that's not.
So everything we own are things that
Are-
schools or school properties, buildings are on,
are,
okay, already on, okay.
because we went through and looked at GIS, I know Aaron was looking through GIS on everything. Mr. Hellick went down and worked with the county, so we had a lot of different eyes on looking for just school board property.
I know you said our September work session is a retreat. Is that something that we could talk about then with because as Mr. Smith was just mentioning, bringing the town and county in to talk about upcoming projects?
Yeah.
Is that something that we could just dedicate a good portion of that to?
Yes, if
That kind of thing?
that's what you'd like.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
If you feel like that's enough, if you can make contact with them and that's enough time to figure it out. Okay.
Yeah, just be sure to look at the pieces of the 8.5 behind and attached to that, to those to make sure that all pieces of property are shown. Because as we work through those, like this one is Bessie Jeffries, and you can see that it does not show this piece being owned by the school board, but if you look on your map and then the 8.5 behind it, it will actually show Warren County School Board owning that piece of property. So that just has to be updated, so.
Looks like you put a lot together in a really short amount of time, so thank you for doing that. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Here, we'll sign these up.
Next up, we're gonna have an instruction update from Ms. Bragg. We're gonna get all our maps put away.
That's all right. Pull two chairs up right there.
Oh, you sit up there?
So you might as well have a seat.
Should we come?
Yeah, come
come on
Yes,
down.
all right.
There you go. I was gonna stay tuned. Well, good evening. I do have two members of the instructional resource team with me this evening. Denise Walton, our testing coordinator, and Darcy Cupp is our curriculum coordinator for math and science. And the bulk of our time will be about our projected accreditation status for this school year, and Denise will kind of kick that programming off for us here in just a moment. But before we get started, I just want to say how busy and exciting that it has been in IRT for the last 3 weeks. It is an extremely busy time for us as we welcome new teachers back that last week of July, and then bring back all the staff the following week, and students last week, and our first full week of instruction is under our belt for the 23-24 school year. And so IRT is just buzzing with things that we have supported in professional development, curriculum deep dives to teachers to get them familiar with curriculum coming back into the school year. And it really doesn't slow down even once the students are back in, because we're already starting to engage in coaching cycles. Denise is getting everything ready to start our first battery of testing. So it's just been like a real sprint to the start of school on the instructional resource team, and the team is just I think it's just staffed with such exceptional individuals, and we wouldn't be able to do so much of what we are able to offer without their help. So I appreciate all of them, and I appreciate these two guys being with me this evening to talk about our projected accreditation status. Do you have the clicker?
I got the clicker.
Okay, so I will turn it over to Denise.
Thank
Yes,
you. I was
sir.
like, I can't see the screen with the camera there. I just want to stress that this is projected. We won't get any numbers from the state until next month, but, okay. I thought I'd start out with a little review of accreditation and what's involved, and there may or may not be a quiz at the end, so. Okay, so we have 9 indicators, and the first 6 apply to every school, and the last 3 just apply to our high schools. So we have academic achievement in math, English is reading and writing, and we only do a writing test at grade 8, so that's the only level that'll have that, and science. And then we have achievement gap in math and science, and achievement gap is our subgroups. So we have 9 different subgroups. And in order for one of those subgroups to count, you have to have at least 30 students in that subgroup, okay? Then we have chronic absenteeism. And then for our high schools, they are evaluated on the graduation completion index, the dropout rate, and this college career and civic readiness index. And that will be reported out for the first time this year. That is for students they have the opportunity to do AP or DE work, dual enrollment. Sorry, I'll start from around acronyms here. Or get a CTE credential, or do a service learning project. So that's what that stands for. Each of those 9 indicators is then assigned a level, 1, 2, or 3, in green, yellow, red are the colors for that. And then based on how we do on those performance levels, we get an accreditation rating of accredited with conditions, or the accreditation is denied. To be a level 1, you need to meet or exceed the state standards, or improve from level 2. Right? And that improvement we call an R10. It means that the failure rate has been reduced by 10%. Then for level 2, you're near the standard, or improve from a level 3 with that R10, reducing that failure rate 10%. And then a level 3, you're obviously going to be below level 1 and 2, or you also stayed at a level 2 or 3 for 4 consecutive years. A couple Couple things I want to point out, when you get a performance level, it's either based on the current year, so in this case, it's when we say current, we're talking about 22, 23, or the 3-year cumulative, whichever of those is greater. Our 3-year cumulative will be looking at data from the school year 18-19, 21-22, and 22-23. You might remember what happened in 1920 and 2021. So those years are not included, because accreditation was waived both of those years. Okay, so if a school has all greens and yellows, they are accredited. If there's one or more red, level 3, then they're accredited with conditions. And then I always say you have to try hard to have accreditation denied, because that means that you didn't implement or adopt your corrective action plan from your level 3. So I feel like you have to try hard to be denied. Okay, does everybody feel good with that? Okay. So here's our math. Our math benchmark is 70%. And what do you notice? Everything is green. Okay, we're all going to be level 1. I will point out that Skyline Middle School is using the 3-year cumulative. Their 3-year cumulative is going to be about a 73. But all of us are level 1. The combined rate versus the pass rate for our elementary and middle schools, they can use growth. Those are the students that failed this year and the previous year that had shown growth. And then for your high schools, it's just the pass rate, the number of students who passed divided by how many were tested. Okay, so good news with math. English, remember it's reading and writing at the middle school level. And everybody has a combined rate here because not only do you have growth in the middle school and elementary, but there's also EL growth. So our EL students who failed the SOL test but showed growth on their EL test, their access for L test, count in the English also. So that does apply to both high schools. We got mostly level 1. Skyline Middle will use their 3-year cumulative at a 68%, and that'll put them in the level 2. And then Warren County Middle School is a level 2 also. The science benchmark is a 70%, and I see I have several notes over there. E. Wilson is utilizing that R10. They reduced their failure rate by 10% from the previous year. And then we have Ressie and Skyline High School, Warren County High School. They'll use the 3-year cumulative. That'll put Ressie at a level 2, and both high schools will be at a level 1 from that.
Yeah, I just wanted to share what I think are some real successes in science, even though perhaps it's our most multicolored chart that we've had thus far. So E. Wilson Morrison was accredited with conditions and underwent academic review last school year for science. And with that reduction in failure rate by 10%, that will move them out of a level 3 and into a level 2. We'll talk a little bit here in a minute about how chronic absenteeism fits into the picture, but if chronic absenteeism was not in accreditation, then E. Wilson Morrison would have come out of accredited with conditions and would have been accredited in academics. And I just think that is a big success for E. Wilson Morrison, its teachers, and its staff. Also, LFK was also accredited with conditions for science and underwent academic review this past school year. They were a level 3 from the 21-22 school year. And so they moved from a level 3 to a level 1 in science on a new test, which is quite the uphill battle when the test changes. We all know typically when the test changes, the scores tend to drop off in the middle of a renovation. And had a change at the leadership level with Mrs. McDonald's going to support services. And so I think that's a big success for LFK and the hard work that they have undertaken this past year through the academic review process and that sort of thing. So those are 2 big successes, and LFK will be accredited accredited. Again, I'm gonna put the star at the end. With the,
With
with
academics,
the,
yes.
yeah, they're accredited with academics, but I put the star because we'll talk about the chronic absenteeism here, in a minute. But those are big successes, I think, coming out of accredited locations.
Okay, you're gonna, just sidetrack from the whole accreditation thing and just look at the last 2 years, and we, have highlighted several areas where there was improvement from the previous year. Both high schools saw an improvement in math, and Warren County High School also, has an improvement in English. And then we have 5 schools that have shown improvement in science with that new test, so we're pretty impressed. And there are a lot of areas where they basically just stay the same, or if there was a decrease, it wasn't very much.
And you may recall, we talked last year about the focus on science that we were gonna have with the change in the test and that sort of thing. So I do think that has played a role in seeing some of those schools improve even on a year that there was a new test.
Yes, sir.
What are you gonna do with the middle schools on the science? Because
Skyline
that's pretty
Middle
rough.
School. It's not-
So, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I'll let Denise kind of wrap up her presentation, and then Darcy's gonna talk about what we've already started with, middle school, and actually for science, it's pretty much a K-12 effort, to talk about what we're doing, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the other things we're doing with middle school
Okay,
to help
that's fine.
improve, if you don't mind.
No, no, not
Okay.
at all.
Okay, so achievement gap, remember those 9 subgroups? They all come together. So all the 9 subgroups for math and then all the 9 subgroups for English. And the majority of us are sitting with 1s or 2s. I do have Skyline Middle School at level 3s on both of those. Okay.
Yeah.
Chronic absenteeism. There's an exception to every rule. Everything that we just told you, forget it for a second. So in April, the Board of Education met about one of the things on their agenda was chronic absenteeism, and we were sitting like this hoping that it would be waived again. Remember, so the school year 1920, the school year 2021, everything was waived. The school year 21-22, they waived chronic absenteeism. 22-23, they said no. And so it's only based on the current year. So you can see we have A.S. Rhodes at a level 1 and Hilda J at a level 2. And then right now, everything else is a level 3. I will tell you, this includes all the students, and it'll only count the students who are with us 50% or more of the year. So I don't know how many, I'm looking at RESI, I mean, they're sitting at 25 and 2600%. So there's a chance maybe RESI would come up to a level 2 in
Can you
chronic.
remind us what chronic absenteeism is, those numbers, so that just everybody
Yep.
knows those numbers we're talking about?
Yes, less than 15% is a level 1. 15 to up to 25 is a level 2.
Percent of the days
And it's kids who've missed 10% or more of the year.
of the
So in a typical year, if we have 180 days, it would be
yeah.
18.
Gotcha. That's what, yeah, I think, and for the parents watching and stuff, just knowing those numbers, 18, and what that reflects.
Smart.
Yeah.
Would it be possible, I'm sorry, I have a visual issue, I can't see the
Oh, because
the
of the
stuff
lights.
written in the red, I can't see any of the percentages, could you just,
Would that hurt the-
sorry.
That's all right. Do you want me to tell you what the
If you
numbers
could-
are?
if you
And I can
don't
share
mind
the
reading them
presentation
out,
with you
that
all
would be-
as well, and
I have
probably
here, I
if you need it.
can't, the color difference, I just can't see, I'm sorry.
How's that?
That's
Does that work?
Yes, yeah, that's
Okay.
better. Yeah, thank you.
Does being late count as into chronic absenteeism, or it's maybe they miss the whole day? I don't know if that works.
Being late.
I thought Ricardi doesn't count in that.
I think it's full day of absence. We will share that the Board of Education is going to talk about chronic absenteeism again in an upcoming meeting. I believe it's in September that is the next meeting, maybe around the mid-September, the 13th, I think it is when it starts. And they're taking up the chronic absenteeism flag again after having just talked about it in April. not sure what exactly it is they're looking at. I don't know if they're looking at projected numbers around the state and seeing what we're seeing, where we go from 2 schools potentially being accredited with conditions to now, 7 schools, and what that looks like for supporting that through the Office of School Quality and that sort of thing. But as Denise said, they did just vote to keep it in accreditation in April, and all indication is they're going to look at it again in September. So is that to talk about what product absenteeism looks like going forward? Is it to have something to do with this before final numbers come out in late September on accreditation? We don't know, but it was slated to be discussed again. So, it could hopefully still have an asterisk out there to the side of it. And I'll talk again towards, kind of what our recommendations and some of our remedies that we're working on about absenteeism as part of kind of what we're doing to address some of our issues.
I didn't put any information up here about graduation rate or the dropout or the CCCRI. Typically, both high schools sit at a level 1 for graduation and dropout, so I wouldn't expect anything else. And then last year, they did provide data for us on the CCRI, and both schools were at a level 2. So that's why I just put level 1 or level 2 on both of those. So looking at this, we would have AS Rhodes and Hilda J and their status be accredited, and then the remaining schools would be accredited with conditions.
And if chronic absenteeism were removed, then the accredited with conditions would be at Skyline Middle and Warren County Middle. See what they do.
I personally feel that if you're chronic absenteeism, it's a double whammy because it's going to affect your performance also. So,
So the parents in our community have the control right now over how to turn our schools around by just getting your child to school.
I mean, we do approach it as a joint effort. We understand that, I think instruction does play a role in attendance, making school engaging for students. But at the end of the day, it does start at, in the morning, are we getting out of bed? Are we getting on the bus? Are we getting to school? And it is a partnership that we have to forge between parents and the school district to turn chronic absenteeism around. And the community. I don't want to leave them out. It really needs to be a community effort.
And can we clarify, make sure because if I understand correctly, this is where when parents are thinking, well, it's an excused absence, but it still is, in the eyes of the state for this, an absence is an absence. So even if you have 16 excused absences, which certainly do happen, I think a big point for clarification is in the eyes of the state under this, an absence is an absence regardless if it's an excused or an unexcused, because I know we just had, a work session and we talked about updating that. So, it's kind of like peeling back an onion, there's always another layer. But I think as much information that we can provide to our parents to understand, yes, even though your child might have missed 10 days as it's excused, it's still gonna.
correct, that's a great
It
point.
It is.
And those
It
are
is,
days
and
that
that-
they're missing the instruction. So when you
Because they're still
have,
missing it.
when you see some of these schools that are setting at close to 40% chronic absenteeism, that's 40% of your population have missed over 18 days of school, which means they have missed that instruction, which may be that concept that, those 2 questions that are on that SOL test that they just were not there for that day, or maybe it didn't get, through remediation, they just didn't get the concept, and so, then that has that effect on the results of the SOL. So, it's important for students to be present during instruction.
Absolutely, and I'll just add to what you were saying, Dr. Funk, that is why the division attendance committee worked last year to put that new attendance policy in front of the board to go into effect. And, here with school starting, we have had some calls about it, so people are recognizing that there are changes to it, and sometimes it does start off with, this seems a little more strict, than what it's been in the past. And another thing the division attendance committee worked on was trying to do some common language across our attendance, secretarial staff and that sort of thing to start to move away from that sort of automatic reaction to say, I'll mark it excused. Because we're really not marking it excused. We're marking you absent. And so we're working, internally on just how we kind of approach some of that, because it's true, when parents hear, I'll mark it excused, it's sort of like it didn't happen. But the state very much feels like that if you weren't sitting in that seat, then you are absent. It doesn't matter if it's for an excused reason or an unexcused reason.
And at what point, what's the magic number of days now that they miss and we lose the matching funds?
I'm not familiar with that.
Greg Crusher had always said that the magic number was like 18 or something like that, that as soon as they hit that 18th absence, or maybe it was 19, I can't remember offhand what the number was, but he said we actually lose funding. Is that not accurate?
I'm not aware of any funding that is reduced, because it goes off of your membership.
Right, so
And-
doesn't it cut them as a member though at some point?
So
Is that not a thing?
I don't believe it's off of daily membership, and so, that would be, I would refer back to Mr. Valentine, who deals with that on the daily. But, you submit those coming up here into September, you'll submit one, and then you submit another one in March, I believe, as far as for attendance, to see what our funding is. So, when you look at it, after 15 days, that student is dropped. If they miss 15 consecutive, they're dropped. That means they're dropped from our rolls. Then yes, we will lose funding for a student that is dropped after 15 consecutive days. You will, but as long as they are on our rolls, you can miss 14, and you have students that miss 14, they show up one and they miss another 14. And so, that's 28 days, but they're not dropped from our roll because they've never met that 15-day threshold. But you do lose funding when you drop them from your rolls, because you have to do an exit code, which removes them off of our books, or our account.
Oh, no, that's good to know.
Alright, so we're gonna talk about some things that science has worked on over the summer. So I met with teacher representatives from each grade level, kindergarten through biology, over the summer, not together, just in separate sessions. So kindergarten first and second met and looked at the new standards and the pacing, and then they incorporated the 5 Ponds Press resource that we have into the pacing guide. So that resource has a lot of online links that are in the online teacher version of the book. So that group looked through those links and really looked at what was in there and what could they use for those specific lessons. Third grade did the same. Third, fourth, and fifth did the same thing with the pacing guide. So really looked at ponds, what's in there, what can we use to teach these lessons. Third grade then looked at their performance-based assessments, because they don't have an SLL test, they do performance-based assessments. And they reworked both of their performance-based assessments, so they are now doing one that's on matter and one that's on food chains, that they felt related better to students and could show better growth on those topics. And then fourth and fifth did the pacing guide with the 5 ponds, and then they also looked at the student detail by question reports overall for the county. So I looked at each school and put all the data together, and then they looked at which topics they taught really well, so which topics the students performed well on, and then which they didn't, and then talk through how can we teach this better on those lower topics.
I just want to interject one thing. You're good. The reason why Darcy worked with the group on integrating the 5 Ponds Press text is that was what LFK shared with us that helped them be successful. So that's the school that went from the level 3 to the level 1. They mandated that every grade level had to use the 5 Ponds Press. It wasn't a resource you could choose to use. It had to be integrated into your classroom instruction. And so that's why, for the county perspective, Darcy worked with the teachers to integrate those resources because of the success we saw at LFK. At the middle school level, they looked at the focus areas with the data, and then they created 2 quarterly assessments, because right now they only had a midterm assessment and a final assessment. So they made a quarter 1 and a quarter 3 assessment as more check-in points to see how students are progressing throughout the year. And then they reviewed those cluster items. CIP made a bunch of cluster items over the summer, so 6th, 7th, and 8th grade looked through those cluster items so that they were familiar with what they look like, and then to see, can we integrate these into some of our assessments. Biology and environmental science met together and looked at the data to see where environmental can put things in that will help lead students into biology. So that environmental course is taken in 9th grade. So they talked through what in that biology course could be added or beefed up into environmental to help prepare students going into biology. And then the biology group made unit assessments because they also just had a midterm test to see how students are doing. So they now have some unit assessments to see throughout the semester how students are progressing. So Mr. Rinaldi, you asked about what we were doing in middle school science specifically. Do you have any questions or follow? Yeah. Well, we got started early, working through the summer, and we'll continue that support, throughout the school year. It's not a one and done opportunity. We'll be, offering coaching cycles with all of our teachers, but, there's also been a science PLC for middle school that was in place this past year, so we'd like to see that continue. Most of the teachers at middle school science participated in that PLC, so like I say, it's not just a summer thing, it'll continue.
For science, and obviously it's been a while since I've had middle school science. Science to me is always like a hands-on experiment. It's very hard to look at a textbook and understand all those processes and stuff. Are we evaluating and looking at making sure all of our teachers have those tools to provide those hands-on experiences for the teachers, so you can talk about it, you can do the example, the kids can get the hands-on experience. Are we looking and making sure, because I hear that a lot, well, we talk about it, but we don't do the actual experiment, and what is going to resonate with our students is that experience. So is that something we're looking at and reviewing too, to make sure these science concepts are not just this thing we're looking at on a piece of paper, but they're experiencing them?
The answer is yes, and I'll point to 2 kind of data points. One, several years ago when we adopted a new science curriculum, the middle schools chose STEM Scopes, which is actually only an online platform. There's no hardback textbook that accompanies it. But if you're in one of our middle schools on the day one of the shipments arrives to replace all the consumables to do all the experiments, there's all kinds of boxes of all the materials that go to make the doing of science possible in our middle school classrooms. And those, there's the initial shipments, had the kind of the stuff you're going to use every year, but as part of our contract, instead of getting like consumable workbooks, we're getting consumable science experiment materials and integrating those into the classrooms. And we continue to encourage teachers and our principals to also encourage their teachers to lean on those textbooks, lean on those supplies that help make those experiments possible, because not everything requires you to drag everything out of the science closet to have an experiment. There's all kinds of opportunities to have smaller experiment opportunities for the students, and be able to get them engaged. And then the second point that I think is relevant is, as part of that science PLC this past year, the focus of that PLC was on 5E lesson planning with the engagement, the experimentation, the evaluation. So that's really a big part of what they focused on in trying to make science more of a doing and less of, a lecture workbook worksheet. Do we have room for improvement? Absolutely.
So I have a follow-up
But it's
then
there.
to that.
Sure.
So with all of that, then, do we have a system in place that's concentrating in science where we are in those classrooms regularly? The administration, the support from the school board office, there's regular walkthroughs so that they're, not that, so that we're for support, like, oh my goodness, I'm doing this, I need this, or, sharing amongst teachers so that there's, those are lower scores. So is there a process in place for a science walkthrough where the building administration, you all from the IRT can get into the buildings to support those teachers? Is there anything like that in place to help support those science areas?
Our building administrators are certainly getting into those classrooms, and anytime that they want, IRT support to help conduct walkthroughs or to do tandem walkthroughs, we're certainly available, to be there to do that, to support our teachers.
So I think
And
that doesn't need, I would suggest that's not if they want support. I think we're at the level that we need some consistency to make sure those teachers have that support. Just a suggestion I would have.
I wouldn't.
Some from some of my educational experience, but they need to know they are supported, and I think there needs to be visibility there. Like, not, hey, we're here if you need us, because some people
Sure.
will not reach out just because that's the nature of who they are,
Sure.
and it's not anything negative if you're not reaching out. It needs to be a positive, and I'd like to see, because we're not going to know until we get in the classrooms and we have those relationships and we're in there with them. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
I do not disagree, and I think that many of us on RT would love to have, more opportunities to be involved in looking and reflecting upon, instruction and lesson planning and things like that in our buildings. We have over the last few years, under Dr. Ballenger's leadership, sort of shifted a little bit away from more of a division down approach, and we had a walkthrough checklist years ago, and its reception with the staff was that it was very monitory and intrusive, and we got a lot of negative feedback on it. So we pulled back from that in an effort to try to rebuild that relationship with the teachers, that IRT is not there to monitor you, we are there to help and support you, and that's absolutely the role we want to play. I'll also say, just on sort of a personal note, I'm thrilled to death to have Darcy full-time on the instructional team to be a math and science coordinator. She was in a math classroom last year at middle school, kind of pulling double duty, trying to do this and complete her contract as a math teacher, and going back a couple years, I mean, all the curriculum was kind of running through myself, and in all honesty, you just can't manage that much curriculum with one person. So I'm thrilled to death to have someone designated for math and science, and I think that that's part of what you see with the summer work that's able to be accomplished when, you have someone designated for those subjects. Absolutely.
When we look at the science numbers that are in the red for Skyline Middle School and Warren County Middle School, is it possible to get a breakdown of how each teacher's, do we have one teacher who everybody's failing, or is it equally dispersed? I'm just curious. And I don't mean to put you on,
No,
we could
but
just get
it's
that.
definitely possible to look at that and tell you that, yes.
I think that would be helpful to see. And then my other question was,
Can I just interject one thing?
sure.
That, just for the public consumption, teacher performance has not been something that we have typically shared publicly. We would share that information with the board, of course.
Okay.
But a breakdown by teacher is not something that we typically have shared publicly.
The middle school kid is, I think middle school teachers are probably the best at coming up with things to challenge middle school kids, because they are,
And
that's
you
a
have two right
challenge
here
anyway.
in front of you who did middle school.
the middle school kid is, they can be pretty trying. They're like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde sometimes. But I have learned when I taught middle school that visual aids were so important, like when we would teach health. The visual aids, things that they could touch and feel, made a big difference. Do we have plenty of visual aids for these science classes?
I mean, it's never been brought to my attention that the schools were in need of, you know, hands-on materials or visual aids or anything like that. There again, I think probably with the ability to, you know, kind of pull those visual aids that are associated with the textbook up on everybody's individual Chromebook, that's nice because I don't have to, you know, look behind somebody, or I'm too far in the back and I can't really see, or we've got a glare on the board and I didn't really see it. And then again, that STEM Scopes textbook supports a lot of the hands-on piece. It's not something that's been shared. Certainly something we could ask.
And one of the things you have to remember is, when I arrived, the board had always adopted a curriculum or a textbook, but there was never a purchase. So some of our textbooks there had never been any purchase of textbooks for some time.
Definitely.
So, you know, there's a difference between an adoption and a purchase. And so when I came in, we purchased a lot of material and wanted those teachers to get out there and find the things that they need in their classroom to make sure they have the tools available to be able to do their job. Because if we're not providing the tools, they're not going to be able to do their job. And so that's why my first year we went on a textbook spending spree and had all these different committees together, purchasing from English to math to science to history to, and so, you know, to be sure that those teachers had the materials in the classroom available to them. And that's where, like, the STEM scopes, that was one of the things that they made that decision there with the 5 ponds at elementary. So, you know, those are tools that if you don't have them, you're not going to be successful. So
I think what I'm talking about on the visual aids is I went to the butcher shop and I was able to get an artery about that long that they cut out for me, and I took that to one of my health classes when I was saddled with teaching health, which is pretty interesting in middle school. But anyway, that artery, they could pull on it, it really made a difference. And I think the visual aids for those kids, it's kind of like a commercial, you know, you only have their attention on that one issue for a few seconds or so, and if they can get creative like that, and that's why I pushed the visual arts things and the aids.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure we have any arteries, but I'm not sure those come in a box, but no, I hear what you're saying, and just based off of what Dr. Ballenger was saying about the purchase of the books, I am going to put a shameless plug in. We were able to do a lot of those textbook purchases that had languished for some time because of COVID CARES money. That money is not available anymore, and we're going to have textbook, you know, opportunities coming up, and you know, funds to purchase in that textbook fund are going to be critical to being able to get our teachers, you know, whether it's a traditional textbook or an online program, or you know, whether it's tangibles. That's a big part of it. And so I'll just put a shameless plug in for some money for, you know, to support that, because I mean, we were able to do that because of CARES, and that money won't be there this next time around.
That hands-on thing with the Chromebook, and you've got a class of 25 kids, you don't know if the kids are all looking at the same thing on their Chromebooks that you think they're looking
We
at.
actually have programs to monitor that,
Yes,
so we do
okay.
that. We can just
We do
close
have
those little
those
All
right.
which allows the teacher to be
Yes.
at their Chromebook, and if a student gets off of the site,
Oh, that's
the
right.
teacher
Okay,
could
okay.
actually pop them back on and get them back on task.
But they
So-
probably don't
so-
figure out a way to reroute.
They do sometimes.
Yeah, because
Homework, computer.
I was told by a student in my neighborhood that during a spelling test, he was able to use his Chromebook to look up the spelling test. So this technology is great, but I guess some old school people like myself, it's like, you know.
Absolutely.
Did you have a question?
I did, so I was told that we don't give homework at all in this county. So
Not by policy.
why is that? Why is that? Like, is that just a individual teacher's decision? Is that across the board? I was kind of shocked to hear that.
I think it depends on the teacher, on whether they feel it's beneficial to give homework or not.
So maybe in the areas where there's red,
Yeah.
those schools should maybe, if science is red, you've only got 37% passing science, like, maybe it's time to say, hey guys, we need to do some science homework, and even just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, just that little extra reminder.
I'm gonna kind of straddle the fence on it. I think there has been through the years a decline across just American education in general in handing out homework. On one hand, I think it has come to circumstances at home and, you know, grading homework that's turned in and things like that. You know, I'm going home to a house that has dinner at 5 o'clock every day. I'm going home where my parents work all night and I'm having to babysit my, you know, 2-year-old brother or whatever. So there's been a little bit of an equity discussion around homework in recent years, and especially grading it, you know, because of circumstances outside of school. You know, the other thing I think too has been, you know, the importance of when we're assigning homework, what that homework is doing. Because, you know, it shouldn't be just, you know, well, more problems, like you did 30 problems, so now you're gonna do 30 more problems. Like, what is that, like, truly focusing that homework. So I don't disagree that, you know, there's not a role for homework or extension, you know, after school, but yeah, but having that conversation about making it meaningful and not just about more.
Yeah, definitely not busy work, I would.
Yeah. But, you know, with those textbooks, you do have that opportunity. There's online, you know, things you can assign and that sort of stuff, because you're not gonna get through a whole textbook in a school year. I mean,
So
there's
when
just
we're talking about the textbook purchases for science, are we talking about like an actual tangible book in the class, or that's not?
Not for
It's
science.
all just online.
STEM Scopes was the selection by the committee, and that is an online book with those consumable kits and things like that for experiments in the classroom. But there's other, I mean, science and biology has a class set of hardback books, and every kit has an online textbook. So it just kind of depends on what that committee at that particular level chose.
And elementary has hard books and consumable workbooks.
And online access.
Yeah, and
So I'm
online
just,
access.
I'm
Yeah.
just curious, I'm just thinking through like the
Yeah.
different learning abilities and, you know, what works for one, what doesn't work for the other, like have the science scores traditionally been this low, or is it maybe it's the switch over to the electronics and we don't have anything that we can, I know I learn better from paper, that's why I'm so obnoxious to Mr. Grant all the time and ask for things printed, because I like to be able to highlight and put notes and things like that. So I didn't know if we had studied that at all.
I think from, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a trend of that heading in a negative direction, and then when COVID hit, it just really fell off the cliff. But there was already a negative trend
Okay.
looking at some of those scores going in the wrong direction. And so now we're you know, trying to make sure that we can get that going back up in a positive direction.
I'll quickly move on. So, although history is no longer part of accreditation, it is still reported on the school quality profile, and one place where history can impact accreditation is that students are still required to get a verified credit in history. So if they don't get the verified credit, it could bite us on like a graduation rate or something like that. But history itself was removed from accreditation 5 or so years ago. So we did want to address, specifically we focused this summer on high school history because of that verified credit. We brought in, primarily it was world history 1 and 2, that's the ancient class and the modern class at 9th and 10th grade, and then the Virginia U.S. history teachers were also there. Looking at what we needed to do to get our history scores up and moving in the right direction, because they, unfortunately, like the science, have been trending down over the past years. COVID exacerbated it, and so we're addressing history alongside our other core that is part of accreditation. So those teachers came in, specifically the World 1 and World 2 teachers asked if they could create new benchmarks that are aligned to the 2008 history standards. The reason for that being, BDOE did not update the World History 1 and 2 standards to the 15 standards back in 2015. So we've been operating off of 2008 history standards and continue to operate off of 2008 history standards for those 2 classes. That test has never been updated. And so they wanted benchmarks, and I think rightly so, that aligned directly to the standards, no confusion. Is there massive changes between 08 and 15? Not massive, but they just felt more comfortable, and I concur, using the standards that are going to be tested. And like Darcy had mentioned in middle school and high school science, with CIP, there is only one midterm benchmark for those classes. So you get one kind of opportunity to kind of check the temperature, and that's it. And so the teachers worked on creating what's essentially quarterly, but at high school with semester classes, it's about every 4.5 weeks. So they created 3 new benchmarks aligned to the 08 standards. Also looked at sharing some resources and best practices for enhancing student engagement in the classroom. Virginia U.S. history, a little bit different. That test was updated to new standards. So they are keeping the midterm assessment that is provided by CIP, but they created 2 additional benchmarks on either side of that. So they now have a 1, 2, and 3 benchmark, just to get more data, because when you're only checking the data at that one midpoint, you don't have you've kind of already covered half the content, and you're just, kind of checking it, at least on a benchmark. They're obviously checking it through their unit assessments and things like that, but on a benchmark, that's the only data point that was available. So making more data available to them. And then a little bit about middle school English, because you'll probably see through the reds and the yellows, the middle school English is showing yellow at a level 2 at both of our schools. Our English curriculum coordinator, she has met this school year already with the middle school principals to discuss developing more detailed writing plans. One of the things that brings that middle school English score down is the writing. It tends to be lower than you may make it on reading, but the writing score will drop you below it. Also, the writing plans will start to address a change in the 8th grade writing test to an integrated reading and writing SOL test. So the writing 8th grade SOL test is going away this school year to be replaced by an integrated reading and writing test. So students will read a passage, it's nonfiction, it's either history or science, respond to about 6 or so comprehension questions, and then their writing portion is related to what they read. So it's designed to make it more realistic, more, you're responding to something instead of just here's a prompt and write, So they are kind of updating that test to integrate the reading and the writing. It's not going to be part of accreditation. It's not going to be part of accreditation, but it will generate a literacy score for the students. So, we may see some uptick in our English scores by removing that writing component. That helps with accreditation. It doesn't address the part where our students need to be doing a better job with writing at that level. So they're still gonna be tested, we are still gonna very much have it on the radar, just like we do with history, but it could potentially impact some accreditation going forward. So looking at new resources to practice those new item types, we're trying to, beef up our bank to be able to address that new writing program that's coming for the end of this year. And then on attendance, the Division Attendance Committee, we are holding monthly meetings. Our first one is Friday morning. One of the big things we're going to focus on because of the change to the absentee policy is the data that we changed the codes on the internal side so that we can pull why are kids missing? Is it absences? Is it vacation? What are the upticks? What are the trends? So we'll be reviewing data at each one of those meetings. We've started to have regular communication with families through some infographics and posting regularly to social media. That's one of the things that committee will be trying to undertake. Just those little factoids to help bring the importance of attendance, how it impacts, if you're missing school in kindergarten, that can impact your graduation because you're starting to set that trend from as early as kindergarten that you're not coming to school on a regular basis. And so just trying to provide facts and information to help parents. And we started that at open house with a couple of flyers on the updates to the attendance policy so parents were aware, and also some tips for making a successful year with being at school on time. And then we will look at other attendance initiatives that will be undertaken this year and perhaps an opportunity to partner with the communications director through the town of Front Royal has reached out and offered to help us try to do some community campaigns. Really quick, because you all have seen presentations on Skyline Middle School and the things that they're looking at. I point out Skyline Middle because they are, again, accredited with conditions. It is likely that they will still be federally identified through ATSI. We have the partnership with the American Institutes for Research that was addressing the special education, specifically the special education piece that Skyline Middle School is identified in with with ATSI. And so, but they are doing professional development for our entire staff because our special education students are in all of our classrooms. So they've started that process. They've had one professional development already with AIR. The second one is the early out day, the August 23rd date, I believe that it is. And we're going to look at what that second year of that partnership would cost and what that'll look like. That has been paid through the school improvement grant from the state is how we've paid for that partnership. They've adjusted to the 7-period day. I was talking to Mr. Johnston, Dr. Johnston now, as I was coming in today. They're working on the 7-period day. It's an adjustment, but he said it's going well, getting good feedback from parents and that sort of thing. They like the idea of the shorter class periods, but it also offers that opportunity for extension and remediation under the block schedule they didn't have. And then the additional instructional support, that because of the move to the 7-period day, it opened up some teaching positions that we reclassified and that you all approved to gain Skyline Middle School a building level reading remediation teacher and 2 building-based instructional coaches. And from the data here, and you have this on a separate sheet of paper, so that you can yeah. You'll notice that Skyline Middle School sort of stands out when you look at the columns, the 2 from the right, 2 in from the right. Teachers with 1 year full-time teaching experience, Skyline Middle School last year was at 16% roughly, and the percent of teachers with a provisional license was almost a quarter of their staff. And that is where we also see the greatest need, both with the academic performance, and as you kind of move to the left, they also have one of the higher poverty rates. So those things all kind of play in together with the puzzle of accreditation and meeting those benchmarks and things like that. So as part of teacher retention, not just at Skyline Middle School, but the importance of it throughout the division, IRT has made collective teacher efficacy and this idea that we are all better together, kind of the theme for the year. We kicked it off at the administrative retreat in July, and it will be the theme throughout all of our principals instruction meetings throughout the school year. And so under that kind of guise of teacher efficacy, it is that sense of community and that idea that it is the whole school and the school itself that can affect change, and that working together, it's about believing in each other's abilities and kind of sharing that burden together, thriving together, sharing successes, and learning from each other. The thing about teacher efficacy is that I think it's 2 points that's important to Warren County. It's strongly correlated with student achievement, and it also is shown to have a positive impact on staff job satisfaction and negative effect on burnout. So it addresses both our academic piece, achievement, and our teacher retention issues. So this is going to be our theme throughout the year. We have all kinds of professional development happening. There's a professional development fair at Convocation with 20 teacher-led opportunities for our staff to engage in PD through just getting started this year. And Hope and Doug are going to present at the September meeting what all that included and give us a detailed rundown on that. We're offering student-centered coaching, instructional partnerships. Hope's working on a teacher support committee. So as I started the presentation, IRT is very busy supporting our teachers and working on student achievement and helping our teachers stay. Rush through the last so we can be done. Do you have any questions? Do what?
It's cold.
Yeah, it's
A little chilly.
Yeah, it's always cold.
So you don't fall asleep.
Or hot.
Are there any questions?
No, that was a lot of good information. Thank you.
I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Heather, you get to stay here.
I do. Now I'm gonna sign my other.
Next up, we have Teacher Performance System Evaluation Handbook.
All right. So the current WCPS Teacher Evaluation Handbook that is linked in our policy manual is dated June of 2012 and was last modified in 2016. There has also been a policy manual that was updated more recently in 2019 that we can find on the drive, but apparently it never came before the board to be adopted into the policy manual. So with recognizing the need to update our teacher evaluation process to include the current standards, which is the addition of that cultural competency standard that was added in 21, and also to recognize that we've moved our evaluation system over to an online system called Evaluate, which our old manuals would not have addressed because that was a change that happened in the recent years. We wanted to put forth, and this is a regulation, right, Dr. Ballenger? Regulation, so for discussion, but it doesn't require action, to kind of hold us over while we work to update our own teacher evaluation handbook, adopting essentially the Virginia Teacher Performance Evaluation System Handbook, which it's a template. And if you open it up, and I hope you can open it up, because I just realized earlier I included it as a document, not as a PDF, so I hope that it opens. It is a very lengthy document. It's 100 and some pages long. And it has a lot of information in it, about kind of how to build your handbook. But it addresses the change to the performance standards, which our teachers need to be aware of. And so kind of as a holdover, while we work to update that template into a WCPS handbook, which I vow to not make 100 pages because I don't think anyone's going to read that. Update our handbook, get our procedures in place, but use the state template basically as a way to hold us over so that teachers are aware of the criteria that they will be evaluated on. It's basically a placeholder. I'm good, but I'm not good enough to get a 100-page document updated in a week.
And really, that needs to involve teachers being part of the committee and, having their say in it. And so to be able to do our due diligence with this by just adopting the VDOE teacher evaluation document, as Heather said, that's a holdover until we can get our committees together, form those groups, have them meet, pour through that VDOE document and our current document and make changes that we need to make for Warren County Public Schools. And so that's really kind of just updating you. That's what we want to do, and that's what we're going to do as far as this year for the teacher evaluation, because we do need to go through that document and get it updated.
What's the time frame to get it updated?
Well, I mean, I think what you're going to see is that for updating our evaluation document, it's going to be probably a year process, because you're going to have multiple meetings.
Sure.
Do those meetings on PD days or early release days, and so there's only certain times that you can meet, because a lot of your teachers are classroom teachers. So I think you're going to see that it's going to be a monthly meeting to go through, and as soon as that group comes together to a conclusion, you don't want to adopt it mid-year. So you'll have to adopt it for going into the next 24-25 school year.
So my proposal to cabinet was I'll create a quick reference sheet that's basically just the bulleted, like, this is the logistics of teacher evaluation. Like, teachers should set their SMART goals by a certain date. We use evaluate, just kind of the bulleted logistical piece of, how we do teacher evaluation, the process. Give that to principals, and then work to update the full handbook. And what I suggested to cabinet was that I go through, get that slimmed down, not to 100 pages, get that slimmed down and identify the pieces where input is valid. So there's no need to talk about changing the standards. That's not negotiable. So, go ahead and update all the pieces that don't really have, a lot of give and take, and then identify the sections where we can have conversations with teachers, administrators, and that sort of thing to make the handbook our own. But that was my proposal to cabinet.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next up, we have the parent and staff classroom survey on the use of cameras.
So this is, I put the results of the survey on. The board asked us to send home a parent survey and a staff survey. Mr. Stefanoski helped to build that, and then we submitted that out to parents and to staff, and did get the results, and so I provided the results there for the board to review and to continue their discussion as far as which direction they want to go with or concerning cameras.
So I know one of the things that jumped out to me was that I think a lot of the concern was about misinformation, that may have been misunderstood about the cameras, thinking that parents were going to be able to just like log onto their cell phone and tap into them and monitor them. I think that was definitely reflected in here. So do we know for sure so people could take the survey more than once?
We were having that discussion earlier, but as Mr. Grant and I were discussing, there is usually a way that if it tags somebody's email address and only allows one response. But if that selection wasn't hit, then there could have been the possibility of that happening. I'm not sure what the setting was on that or not. So, we wanted to make sure that it was anonymous survey from parents and staff, and so I don't know, on that setting, can you do that with an anonymous survey?
It is difficult to do anonymous and then lock them down to one choice or one vote.
So you could keep going in.
Yeah,
and doing it.
yeah, yeah.
I knew I went back in. Were you able to look at it when I sent it to you under mine or no?
Oh, no, I
Good question.
just looked at
Oh,
the
which one?
results and then
Okay.
for parents that can take it again, and then saw some of the comments were copied and pasted. That is different. Now, where would we be storing this? Would it be stored on the cloud or would it be stored in, like,
So can I answer that?
Please.
So that's a great question.
So we have a server on premise, and that server would store the video. We do not keep the video forever because there's not enough storage space. It's very expensive. So yeah, it would stay on premise. It would not leave or go into the cloud.
okay. And so that's how, I think we found out last time that there's already cameras in classrooms at Blue Ridge Tech. And
Yes,
so that's
we
how
were
that's
not
being
aware of that,
stored.
but there are cameras in Blue Ridge Tech, and that is because of safety issues. There are all kinds of tools and things like that. They just need to be able to monitor that, so.
I guess they're just doing their own.
No,
They
it was
care?
part of our system. I just
You
wasn't
just
aware
weren't
of
doing
it.
it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was part of our whole, we have everything standardized so that, we're using the same standards, same servers and the same type of software to pull the videos from, so that we're not having to teach one school how to manage theirs and another school differently, and it's easier to keep up when you keep everything standardized.
Can you paint a picture for me on, I know everybody, I guess, has a different viewpoint, so there's not a room with like a wall of different TV screens where somebody is sitting in there and like continuously watching what's going on,
Yeah.
correct? We're only pulling footage if something has
Yes.
happened.
Yes,
There's been an
so
incident.
software would be put on computer of an administrator. That administrator would have to have permissions and a login to get in. So just not anybody could pull it up. You would have to have your, credentials, and then you could do it from a computer as long as we installed the software on that computer.
And then I had seen comments about, well, why don't you get the cameras that you already have up and working first? Is there a way that we could have an assessment done where somebody goes around and checks and says, okay?
Yeah, we have that. So we do have a lot of, I'm not sure what they're talking about, which ones are down. There are periodically ones that are down. But our last security grant brought most of those up. That was mostly at the high schools. And they were just camera replacements. They just get old in end of life. So
they're working. Okay,
yeah,
so that's just misinformation.
yeah, we should,
floating
yes,
around
I
there.
believe
Okay.
that is,
Okay. No, I like to clear all that stuff up. Okay. Do we have any idea how much it would cost to add cameras to every classroom?
I did, it would, I don't remember. I did pull a quote for you, and I do not remember what that quote was, but I can pull it again. I've got it in my email somewhere.
Well, we didn't ever see it though. For every
I
classroom.
think I gave it to somebody. Do you remember seeing the quote?
We saw
We
for
only
the
saw
10
the one
pre-K,
for the
or 10
preschool,
classroom.
yeah,
The
the
preschool, that's the only one I've pulled, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, you would just divide that or multiply that by how many classrooms we have, and that would be the number. Do you remember how many classrooms did we talk about in preschool? 10. So that would be easy. Do you remember what the number?
About 12,000, I
1,200 per classroom.
Because we were talking about 10.
Yeah, so we're talking about 10.
1,200 per classroom.
So 1,200 per classroom, so multiply that by however many classrooms, and then that's your number.
So even if we were going to increase our cameras by that much, we wouldn't need to increase our server space?
We would.
Okay, so it'd be an additional cost.
We would dramatically have to increase it, yes.
Okay.
And that would be another quote, and we'd have to look at, research that.
Do you feel like in our areas of our buildings now, the common spaces, I know Ms. Sally's just asked about cameras working or not working, but what about common spaces that could just use the addition of cameras? I think that came up a few times in our conversations.
Yes, there's always more spaces, there's always more requests, and it comes down to funding, how much funding we have to be able to take care of that. But there are certainly more places we could put cameras.
So when I look at this, I mean, I haven't had a chance to read all the comments, but I've read some of them. But, just generally what I'm seeing is 2/3 of our teachers are opposed to cameras, 2/3 of our parents are in favor of cameras. And those are obviously two of our most important constituencies as a board. And we're not on the same page as a community. So that makes me feel like I want to take a step back, and I don't know if it's having conversations with community, maybe focus groups or something along those lines. Maybe there's a consultant. I mean, one of the things that was brought up is maybe are cameras even effective? And is there research on that? Is that something we could look into? Maybe both sides here are reacting emotionally, which I would understand. There's a lot of emotions tied up with it I think for parents and for teachers. But maybe if we could have a more neutral look from someone who is not emotionally invested, and I don't even know if that exists.
Yeah, and
I mean, I don't want to do it if it's not going to work. I don't think anybody
right,
wants to do it if it's not going to work. And how do we know if it'll work?
well, and I think we have to look at the purpose behind it in the beginning as well, which the purpose behind it was when there's an incident in the higher level grades, there are other children that can speak up. And we have to look at it from, yes, what spawned this was the allegation at Hilda and the fact that children of that age cannot take a stand in a court of law and testify to what happened to them. So it was originally brought up to help protect those without a voice. And for that matter, then, something that Mr. Rinaldi had brought up is how much staff time is being consumed by the number of allegations that are happening. Because for the ones that we hear about, there are dozens more, but it's taking hours upon hours upon hours to go back and he said, she said, and quite frankly, in the older grades, the cameras could protect some of the teachers because it wouldn't be a question of, well, this child accused of this and whatnot. It would be beneficial for the teacher to say, whoa, no, I didn't do that. I, up until this survey, was really pleased, and it actually mentioned the fact at one of the last board meetings about how I really liked that we were having this open dialogue and civil conversation, and it was just a very, we, as a board, included the community in this conversation before any decision was officially made. But I have to say, some of these comments from the teacher surveys are horrific. And for me, that's not the way that I was really sitting the fence on this one and seeing some of these comments. That is just not the way to get your point across, teachers. I mean, telling us that, well, we'll use a child somewhere else, that's not a comment I really liked to read on here, and I know it was unsettling to some of our parents because I got feedback about it once it was on the agenda. I'm hoping that this can remain a civil conversation and not devolve into this hate-fueled rhetoric, because that was never the intention of this board. That was never the intention of the parents who had suggested this in the first place. And ending that conversation real quick when we start saying nasty things to each other, it's out of line. Disappointing, quite frankly. I was disappointed to see some of the nasty comments that were made. I think we can have this conversation without taking it to that level. So that was my takeaway from these surveys. And I think the comment was also made, I know the comment was made, that there is no other profession that requires cameras, and that's absolutely not true. Our officers wear body cameras. We have cameras in banks, we have cameras in auto mechanic shops, we have cameras inside of the vehicles that delivery drivers drive. So
School bus drivers drive.
that,
Or school bus drivers.
and on the school bus, right, and with the children's privacy, okay, well, right now, we've got cameras in all the places that watch only kids, not vice versa. And so I did take the time to reach out to law enforcement to find out, what is the take on body cameras? Because, I mean, if you know me personally, I am so anti Big Brother. Like 1984 was one of my favorite books. Like, I am so anti cameras. And I'm really trying to look at this from a logically consistent viewpoint. And, hearing from law enforcement, what they said was, at first, the officers were very much against it. It was the same kind of a very emotional reaction. And then, once they got the body cameras, now the officers are in favor of it, because all it takes is one false allegation against you as a professional that you are then thankful that camera was there. With that said, I don't want the teachers feeling like this is going to be done to them. I don't want that at all. I don't want the parents thinking that they aren't safe to send their children to school, or that if we talk about adding cameras in classrooms of children who can't speak for themselves, that's in some way discriminatory, because there is a logical reason why some children can speak for themselves and some can't. So I think, at least for me, this discussion is still just getting started, but the quickest way that we're going to end this is if we turn this nasty, because that kind of nasty behavior is exactly what is making parents feel like they need to have cameras in the classrooms in the first place. As a side note, I'm completely opposed to ever using camera footage to evaluate teachers professionally. I think we need to have, when they have those evaluations done, somebody needs to be doing them the old-fashioned way that they've been done with observations. Nobody wants to feel like they're being spied upon. So those are just my thoughts. I don't have an answer at this point, so I don't know.
So I just got a report on the cameras on what's down. We are at 99% up. There's actually just 2 down right now. One at Hilda Barber and one at Warren County High School. So I think that's pretty good.
That is very good. I'm sorry that this information was put out against you guys on that. Because I was shocked when I read that. I was like, what are we talking about? I know that we voted.
Well, if you're in a corner of a room and you have 2, or a corner of a building and you have 2 cameras and one of them's down, then it seems like in your world, half the cameras are down. And it's really just one. But we're looking at the whole system, so.
That's good to know. Sure. That makes parents feel better.
Well, and I would like to see what research is out there. I think, we need to continue to explore, looking at all the options, looking at both sides, looking at the valid research that is available, if there is any. I haven't looked yet. I think there's a lot we still need to consider and work through. I don't have a quite answer, but I feel like that's where we're all, and I want all sides to know that, I think, personally, we do want to work through and make sure the bottom line is we need to do what's in the best interest of our students. And that we might not be able to move quickly on that. It's gonna take some time.
I think it escalated really quickly at our first work session, rightly so, because everyone was really emotional. And we felt like we needed to start moving on something, and now we just need to pause and bring all this information together. So I like your idea of just kind of taking a second. You know, really- I like Ms. Lowe's idea of just giving it a little more time here.
I think when we met with the teachers, a lot of the teachers, well, the ones that were there, a couple of them, not all of them, but were concerned that it would be used in the evaluation process. And, you know, if you're an administrator and you've got a teacher that's a little suspect, you might want to drop in on the camera thing, you know. You can always, of course, walk through the hallway and walk in the classroom too. So if we can get the evaluation concern out of the camera issue, it might be more accepted by the teachers. And I think that's the biggest hiccup that we have is the evaluation process, using the cameras. So.
Well, and in general, who has access? Because again, like everyone was saying, it's not just a live feed that just any parent is going to be able to have. Any teacher is going to be able to live feed into another classroom.
And what are those conditions for which they would have access, not because, oh, I just want to look at it today.
Yeah.
That,
Well,
you know,
yeah.
what are those conditions for access?
So if the administrators can be held back on that a little bit, where they just can't drop in and watch the feed, then that might make the teachers a little bit more appreciative of the camera idea.
Well, and one of the things that had come up in some of the comments, because I thought they were great comments about like, you know, having private phone calls with like the spouse in the classroom, or you know, pumping breast milk and things of that nature. Now, and I'm a huge breastfeeding proponent as well. However, we do also have to consider that this is a place of business, and that classroom is not your home space. And I certainly hope if we do this, we would have to provide teachers' lounges and places where they are not being filmed and could have those conversations and those private moments and whatnot. But realistically, like, your classroom is your place of business. So a child could walk in at any time. I mean, it wouldn't bug me if a child walked in and Mrs. So-and-so was sitting there pumping, but I don't know if all parents would feel that way. And, you know, I mean, if you're having a heated conversation with a spouse in your classroom, well, you can't, there isn't necessarily for me the presumption of privacy when you are in your tax-funded place of business and not in a break room. So that's just something to consider for whoever left those comments as well.
So I think one place also to start would be for Mr. Grant to see what, and probably work with Mr. Smith to see how many classrooms we have in the entire division, give you a number, but then also at the same time, see what storage space would be needed for that, get a, you know, that's also a piece of it, the cost of it, and allow you to look at, you know, we're gonna need, you know, it may come up, you need 10 more servers to handle that. You know, what's the cost? You know, probably thousands of cameras, you know, or at least I know hundreds, but get a number to where you can also look at that. But I think you're all on the same page of you know, more communication and research. And I mean, if there's you know, if the board wants us to look at something, let us know so we can start digging up that information for you so that you guys have the information that you need to make a sound decision. You know, that's what we're here for. And we can definitely Joe to work on that.
I mean, I think we should start keeping a running total of how many accusations are made as well, because I know most of them don't make it all the way to us, but once they do, like, these are, I don't think people realize, like, how much time is involved and how much staff time that is pulled away from your regular jobs of you know, interviewing potential witnesses and this, that, and like, there are a lot of accusations that are coming in. And I don't know, my experience with just hearing the number of accusations has kind of pushed me to the point where it's like, well, I don't think I'd want to spend time alone with a child without somebody, a witness or a video or something. Yeah, it's, and obviously I can't elaborate much more on that, but it's kind of alarming, the number of accusations. At least it alarmed me.
Okay, well, I don't think we're gonna solve this problem
Yeah,
tonight.
let's move on.
So we're gonna just hold on this for now.
And I mean, and if there's another survey that you want to put out or additional questions, you know, that's, you know, this is the first time you guys are getting to see the data, and we left it out there for, I think, about 3 weeks or so to make sure we give parents an opportunity and staff. And so if there's additional surveys that you want us to push out, we can definitely also push out additional surveys to answer additional questions that you may have to include the community.
What other school systems could we reach out to that are using cameras and see how it's working for them? And maybe even involve the Warren County teachers group to seek out other teacher groups, maybe different counties.
So I don't think you're gonna find any counties in Virginia. I think you'd have to move over to West Virginia to get some divisions where the law was passed a few years back or 5 years back, and probably send administrators over to, and with staff over to look at and have conversations with schools in West Virginia where it is a law for, I believe it's the pre-K and
Any
self-contained.
room that's considered a self-contained classroom, so, that's a variety. It's not all pre-K programs, but there's, a handful in pre-K. As far as K through 12, it's, what the law says is there's any classroom where, it's considered an SCE classroom.
So I think you'd need to travel over there and look at, have conversations with those schools and those staff members.
How have the teachers received it in your school? Like, what is the, I'm just curious.
It's, we function every day. We do that. That's where I work. I'm an administrator there. We went through the whole process of it coming in, of the cameras coming in those classrooms. There's training, and, I personally have had, some classrooms in my building that have had it, depending on, the needs, and it has not been, from my perspective and what I've been involved with, I haven't had any bad experiences with it, or any, I'm just a very small piece of that, but yeah, it's moved in and,
I didn't have any hiccups when I installed them in my classrooms in Oklahoma, so that's, but, it's, if we, and I'm open for staff members to take a field trip to go have, conversations, and maybe, and maybe that's what we need to do, is get a group to say, hey, who wants to be represented, we're gonna take a field trip, if you wanna look at it and see, that would be part of that conversation piece. And do that with a parent group. Maybe we take a parent group and a staff group together and go over one day and take a field trip.
All right.
All right, last we have our VSBA discussion. Ms. Hamlin, do you want to update us on the legislative position notice?
Yes.
You should all have your
We've already
letter.
gotten the email, but.
Close the letter.
So the 5 legislative positions that we submitted to their committee to try and get permission to then have it presented at the delegate assembly to be voted on. 4 were denied, shot down, and only 1 was passed, which means it's just passed through to the delegate assembly to vote on. Ironically enough, that's the exact same one that I had argued last year, and it got shot down by 95% at that one, which was, for those of you at home watching, the VSBA is a lobbying group, and so these are their lobbying positions. And so the VSBA is lobbying our state and federal government to put the priority of funding into energy efficient renovations. And so Warren County had requested that, with all the incidents of violence happening in schools across the country, that it would make sense to ask that the lobbying be focused on renovation money to be given for safety and security upgrades. And last year that was shot down by 95% of districts that were represented, and that's the one that they have allowed us to go forward with this year. And they shot down all 4 of the other ones, which our entire position on that was that this is what the SBA says they stand for, which is local control over schools. So, yeah. I'm ready to withdraw from the VSBA. It's the system is stacked, it's rigged. This is a complete, total, and utter waste of time. I mean, this is how thick their rule book is for just even submitting these things to them in the first place. And at this point, the cost-benefit ratio for me does not, this just doesn't look beneficial to me anymore at all. We objected last year to multiple different positions. The VSBA is very clearly focusing their lobbying issues on what works for Northern Virginia and districts that have billions of dollars in their budget. And they are using this as a means by which to suck more money into those divisions, whereas divisions like us in the rural areas with smaller budgets are just getting annihilated with this stuff year after year. The electric buses is the perfect example of that. I mean, we're sitting here, we're waiting for years on our 8 diesel buses that cost, maybe $100,000, and we've got larger divisions who have now taken their entire bus fleet that may have only been 3 years old and have replaced them all with $400,000 apiece electric buses. So they're taking the lion's share of the Virginia state tax funding and throwing it into these billions of dollar budgets, while little old Warren County here is like struggling to get our 8 diesel buses, which, by the way, we can't even use electric buses out here. They won't get up the mountain. So we are just completely forgotten about with all of this. I mean, there's example after example.
We couldn't use their old buses.
Right. Oh, and that's the best part. Yeah. So to save the environment, while they get rid of their 3-year-old diesel buses and replace them with $400,000 electric buses, they have to take the old buses that were perfectly functioning and destroy them. They fill the engine block with concrete where they shred them. So now we're putting all that into the landfill, and Mr. Mitchell took the time and he reached out to all these districts who were replacing their perfectly good buses to see, hey, can little old Warren County, could we possibly buy them used? Nope, they have to be scrapped. So
It's crazy.
It's infuriating, and it's just example after example after example of how really it's the rural communities who are getting completely railroaded by this organization. And so they said, well, Warren County, you can opt out of us lobbying on your behalf. So silly me, I thought when they sent out all their lobbying materials to our state legislator, that they would say, oh, except Warren County. No, it doesn't. It still says, the VSBA still stands up there and they say that we have 100% membership, we represent every single district in the state. So then I took the time to personally email every single state legislator and say, hey, Warren County is not okay with this. Like, we would really love some money down here for, you know, just like the basics, like maybe some more textbooks or something. I don't know. Maybe we could take one electric school bus as value and just let us have some textbooks. But we are not going to be heard. And I think it is time that the SBA has to officially admit that they have lost a district. And they've lost this district for no other reason than the fault of their own for ignoring the needs of rural Virginia, smaller counties. So I'm ready to leave the VSBA. We have other means of trainings, and there are alternatives at this point. I'm done with them. Not to mention, don't even get me started on all their bullying behavior. So that's where I'm at. Where's the rest of this board at?
It sounds like you're saying that one size fits all.
And it doesn't fit us.
It doesn't fit us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we've given it a good shot. And you know, a year ago, I said, all right, let's give it a try. Like, let's really try to play their game by their rules and see if they will hear us. And we are just not being heard. And now I'm understanding why when I went to well, it was Zoom. It wasn't a go-to thing, but the delegate assembly. I mean, there's 133 school districts, and they did roll call, and it was like 90 school districts were represented. And my first thought was, wow, it's weird. 43 school districts didn't even bother to show up. And I started talking to some of the other districts, and they were like, you are wasting your time. They will not hear you. They will never advocate for rural, small districts. But I'm naive and a glutton for punishment. So like I have put in 100% effort on this. I've read their book. I've read their rules. I thought that as a board we put together some really quality suggestions to them. And I mean, all this work, and this is what we got. When I presented our ideas to them, it was again on a Zoom computer screen. The committee wasn't even on the screen. Like, they were just some random people in the back that I could hear cough every now and again. When I presented them, I asked them, do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? Would you like us to make any edits? Like, getting some feedback. I didn't get a single word. Nothing. There was nothing. They just, all right, thank you. We'll let you know. You'll hear back in 5 to 7 days. And then when I, emailed them 2.5 weeks later, this is what I got. So.
Well, I know you put a lot of work and time into that, and I see your frustration.
Thank you.
No, I think Ralph and I can both say, and well, everybody, for as long as we've been on the board, this is the first time we've had a really active delegate trying to have Warren County's voice get heard. And I think that this might be an example of kind of a little bit too little, too late. Not because your effort was too little, but it takes all those other 40-some counties that didn't bother to show up to actually show up together.
And I think we kind of talked about that. Maybe we could start, and other counties would, want to contact us and say, hey, what are you looking at? What are you doing? And it's kind of gone silent.
My prediction, my personal prediction, is just my opinion, but from talking to other board members, we are not the only ones who are feeling ignored, and I think if we leave, I think other boards will follow, and I think it will send a message to the VSBA that you gotta start paying attention to the little guy, because you lost track of the little guy, because this is a business for them, and those school districts that have the billions of dollars of budgets is very profitable to this organization. So with us, with our little budget, like, they don't care. They just don't care.
It's not only Northern Virginia, it's Richmond,
yes,
Norfolk,
yes,
all
very
the
true.
metropolitan areas in the state.
Very true.
It's It's just the way it is, you know?
So this will be an action item for our September meeting, certainly. I know we'll be hearing from the community between now and then. For Mr. Grant, I'd like to know at that meeting, because we use our board docs, I know we've talked about this before, but just to like update what our information is, because we get our board docs through VSBA, so knowing, you know, what, again, just one more time, what we pay now, what we would move to use instead. Would we still stick with board docs and pay our own price, or are we moving to a different platform, and what are those options? I think that's important for us to know and have available for that meeting beforehand if we can. Otherwise, I think we've talked about it before as far as training goes. It's really just Dr. Ballenger and school board members that, and perhaps clerk of the board if you chose to do some VSBA training, but I think that's all we really identified. Is that correct? Maybe finance?
Yeah, there's, and I think Buck does some, and so.
And there are other trainings available, and for those who don't know, like we pay our membership to VSBA, and then we still pay on top of that for trainings.
The trainings aren't free.
No, they are not free, and the other trainings that I've found that I've taken have been less expensive and quite frankly, better trainings. And then the county uses something called Civic Engage, is their program that they use. The town uses a different one. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I know personally when I check agendas and whatnot, I like the Civic Engage better. And I know ever since this last board docs update, it's been glitchy. Like, I've talked to you about it where you have to go in and you just to look at policy. Like parents are trying to find like a form or a document, and they go on there. You search one or two times, and then all of a sudden you can't see anything at all. And you told me you have to clear the cache, and then it works again. I think there's got to be something better out there. It's worth exploring, certainly. So.
Alrighty.
Okay. If you could, please read us into closed session.
Yes. This motion is made that this open public meeting of the Warren County School Board become a closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711. The school board desires to discuss the following matter in a closed meeting. Section 2.2-3711A1, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of employees of the school board, specifically an employee personnel issue. And Section 2.2-3711A3, discussion or consideration of the disposition of real property held by the school board, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the school board related to temporary or permanent easements and potential sale or exchange of property, and pursuant to Code 2.2-3711A8, for consultation with legal counsel retained by the school board regarding specific legal matters related to temporary and permanent easements, the potential sale or exchange of property, and a dispute regarding contractual and real property interests requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel.
Is there a second? Second. Mr. Grant, could you do roll call, please?
Certainly, Mrs. Love,
Aye.
Mr. Rinaldi,
Aye.
Mrs. Salins,
Aye.
Dr. Fox,
Aye.
Dr. Prince.
Aye. Thank you. We're gonna stay in here, Dr.